Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anthony Alaka with Torrey Hills Capital. I want to welcome you to the Revive Therapeutics webcast for February 24th, 2022. I hope everyone's doing well, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Revive Therapeutics is a life sciences company focused on the research and development of therapeutics for infectious diseases and rare disorders. The company's pipeline includes a treatment for COVID-19 using bucillamine, which is finishing phase 3 trials. The company is also involved in the psychedelic space, targeting treatment for substance abuse disorder, neurological disorders, mental health, and liver disease, as well, using psilocybin and cannabidiol. Revive Therapeutic trades on the OTC market under the ticker RVVTF and on the CSE under the ticker RVV. The company's shares are currently trading with only a market cap of $65 million US. Based on the size of the addressable market and where they are with their trials, we feel that there's plenty of upside in the stock. With us today to discuss Revive Therapeutics and the company's strategy going forward is the company's chairman and CEO, Michael Frank, Derrick Welsh, COO and founder of Psilocybin, sorry about that, Pharma. And we also have Dr. Mark Swaim, our resident expert at Torrey Hills and all things biotech, is joining us as well. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our virtual lunch. Before we get started, I just want to mention, everybody here knows the format. If you have any questions, just simply type them into the Q&A or chat box and we'll make sure they get answered. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Swaim for some opening comments. Then we'll go through the deck, with Michael Frank, and then we'll open it up for some discussion and some Q&A. So with that said, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Anthony. Pleasure to be here, be back again with our colleagues from Revive. Just for sake of full disclosure, we don't give investing advice here or sort of formal endorsements. At the same time, I am a shareholder in the company. I love what they're doing. I think it's rocking, rolling, going places. I like the fact that there's several moving parts on offer, as it were. The thing that initially drew me to it is this very clever invocation of the drug bucillamine for pulmonary COVID-19. That's now in a phase 3 trial, a large one in Turkey. The idea is that the grave kind of pulmonary endpoint of COVID-19, when it goes in that direction, might be averted or offset by aggressive antioxidative or reducing power derived from the agent bucillamine, which is oral and otherwise a benign drug. I think it's a very clever idea. I kind of think it's going to work, but don't bet the farm on that. I like also their psychedelic program and their objectives at trying new indications of cannabidiol, such as for autoimmune hepatitis, a trial worthy, long overdue. And so, clever hooks in the water this company has, and I'd like to welcome them to the webcast. And I think they'll step through all of these programs in sequence and just sort of tell you what is on the offing when you buy a share of the stock. Welcome to Michael Frank, the CEO. Michael, you're doing a great job piloting this thing. A bunch of great ideas. Let's hear more about them.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction, and definitely appreciate Torrey Hills for setting up last couple of meetings across the U.S. and good interaction. So let's sort of walk through some of the slides, the story here, and myself and Derrick, will fill in the blanks, and obviously we could maybe answer some questions and maybe a little more of an informal presentation. So Anthony, you're working through the slides. I guess just go to the next one, or I think it's 2 after this. It starts.
Okay, hold on one sec.
What's it doing? Oh, there you go.
There we are. Okay, back one. Yeah, we're okay. We can start there. So predominantly, Revive is a company that's been around for a 2013 timeframe or so, looking at the potential in repurposing drugs that are hold specific targets, like potential for orphan status or fast track or breakthrough status with the FDA. Looking for drugs that could fill voids in a variety of different sectors. history of the company is goes back before my time as an operator, but I was an investor in the company, and there was some other management involved. And I guess the lead drug that was repurposed at that time was going back to around 2014, 15 timeframe, a drug called bucillamine, which we're currently in a phase 3 with right now. Bucillamine is a anti-inflammatory antioxidant used for about 30 years, South Korea, Japan. It's got a strong safety profile. And back in around 2015 timeframe, Revive ran a phase 2A trial with bucillamine for gout. And at that time, the company was up against colchicine and had pretty favorable results. However, after that trial, the company shelved bucillamine more, and because sort of the cannabis craze, it sort of pivoted more to working on the pharmacology side of cannabis with delivery systems, procured some good IP around CBD and autoimmune hepatitis. The company currently has orphan drug designation for CBD to treat autoimmune hepatitis and also reperfusion injury. It also was going to do some studies with cystinuria with bucillamine, which, as I mentioned, is an antioxidant, antirheumatic, and the company's got a strong patent portfolio. And it's, I guess, the main storyline here is this drug. I'll get into a little more, bucillamine, where we're currently in a U.S. trial, which has some international expansion into Turkey in a phase 3 double-blinded up to 1,000 people. So that's sort of the core program. And over the last couple of years, since I took over December 2019, I really looked at a lot of the other cannabinoid technology we had on the delivery side, and we transcended a lot of that to psychedelics, building formulations and filing a lot of provisional patents. So we have some pretty strong IP around psychedelics with oral formulations, embarking on a number of studies with the University of Wisconsin, and we can get into that a little more. So we're basically not a one-trick pony. We've got infectious diseases, psychedelics, and a pretty strong portfolio also on the IP around cannabinoids for a couple of disorders. Just a quick recap. Next slide. So the strategy, as I briefly mentioned before, is looking at the repurposing clinical development of psilocybin, cannabinoid, and obviously our lead story really in bucillamine, which is the lead platform right now, which we're focused on, as I mentioned, in the phase 3. We're looking also at, fast track status, a lot of different incentives that are offered by the FDA, where we could pick up the opportunity to expand on a lot of different programs, a lot of different drugs. And in this case, as I mentioned, we're focused on infectious diseases and on psychedelics with mental health. And our game plan is really to harness, procure a lot of these drugs and to sort of move it down the clinical path and help, develop strong IP around that and build a portfolio. Next slide. This is a quick glimpse of our patent portfolio right now for Revive. We've got as I mentioned, bucillamine, which is our lead story. We have provisional patents filed for COVID-19. And we also have patents granted for bucillamine for the treatment of gout. We have a lot of strong drug delivery technology around psilocybin, which we've licensed, and on the cannabinoid side, which come out of the University of Wisconsin, where we have an exclusive license on that drug delivery platform. And we filed a number of provisional patents around psilocybin on the sort of on the method and use and on the oral formulation side. You can look at a list of them right there. And as I mentioned, also we've got some strong IP on the cannabinoid side with autoimmune hepatitis, where they were granted. And I should also add in, over the past year, we did some work with a company called PharmaTher, where we basically secured a lot of IP around psilocybin on the stroke TBI side which we acquired from them. So we've got a strong patent portfolio, and that's the core of the company in terms of focusing on sort of the three pillars, which the predominant two, as I mentioned, are infectious disease with bucillamine in the current phase 3 trial, and also on psychedelics on psilocybin side. Next slide. Just getting into the product pipeline. Bucillamine lead story. It's currently in a phase 3. This very unique story in terms of how we got into phase 3 is that back sort of in the spring of 2020, I looked at, with COVID onset, I looked at bucillamine, its safety, its history treating a lot of inflammation. It's got a lot of preclinical work. We ran a gout study. So myself and the team, we went to the FDA to potentially look at doing a phase 1/2 study. But because of our gout work, because of the preclinical, the strong safety of this drug, we were fast-tracked to phase 3, which kick-started back in the sort of the late summer, fall of 2020. At that time, when COVID first started, there was a number of other drugs that were talked much more readily about, some of the monoclonal antibody drugs, and also there were some other arthritic drugs, which were also sort of front and center, but a lot of these drugs were intravenous. So I recognized that opportunity to have a pill to treat COVID could be quite advantageous. And that's how we sort of moved that whole concept, developed a protocol, and went to the FDA with it. The other scenarios you have going on the psychedelic side are psilocybin studies with the University of Wisconsin, which are kicking in mostly this quarter, which are focused on meth addiction and TBI stroke. These are phase 2 studies with the School of Pharmacy, University of Wisconsin. We're also developing with our delivery mechanism from psilocybin with the University of Wisconsin. We developed some oral thin film prototypes, which are now being further fabricated by a group called LTS in Germany, and we hope to move that down the clinical path as well. And on the cannabinoid side, we have obviously, as I mentioned, CBD, some good delivery technology around there, and some orphan drug designations on reperfusion injury and on autoimmune hepatitis, and we're moving that down the clinical path as well. And that's sort of our other pillar. Next slide. So the opportunity really with infectious disease, and where we filed a lot of provisional patents, when you do these INDs, you have to be specific for the disease, and in this case it was for COVID. So we're currently in our phase 3 double-blinded study, and in the US we dosed around 715, and we moved sort of the tail end of the study now because it's an international study, and also because of the profile of patient and some of the other data we looked at in the market from some of the big pharma, that would be advantageous to move a portion of the study internationally, which we have done right now. So that's where we are currently in the bucillamine trial in the US, and what we've done with international efforts ongoing in Turkey. This drug, once again, as I mentioned, strong safety profile, 30-year history for arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis in Japan and South Korea. And Revive has a strong history with bucillamine, 2 INDs with the drug, gout, and also with the current work we're doing with COVID. It's got orphan drug status, and we've done work. A lot of preclinical work has been done with it as well. We should also mention the company was recently awarded orphan drug designation by the FDA for bucillamine to treat reperfusion injury. So that was a couple weeks ago, and I think that further validates the drug. And there's been a lot of work with this drug. It's never been available in North America, but even recently, going past summer, the University of California, San Francisco campus, the team there, Dr. John Fahey, did a lot of work with looking at thiel donors and how thiel donors can act as potentially a prophylactic agent to prevent the SARS virus from binding to the ACE2 cells and preventing COVID. And it showed even that this drug not only has potentially an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant potential, but it also has potential antiviral capabilities. So that was a lot of work done and around Delta, and very exciting. I think it just further validated our position. Those are a number of papers that were written on BioRxV website, and you could access them there. There's a little bit of science, a rationale. Bucillamine, it's as I mentioned, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-rheumatic. Showed that work done with this drug that's 16 times more powerful than nasocystine, which is considered an antioxidant. Nasocystine has been taken for COVID. There's been a lot of press on it. It's readily available in Canada, but in the US, there has, I think they removed it from the shelf, but our drug has, through a lot of clinical work, has shown that it's 16 times more powerful. It's a glutathione enhancer, which is the body's natural way of producing an antioxidant. And our drug is a double field donor, the way it metabolizes in the liver, so it's more powerful. And to support that even further, the work done out of California showed that field drugs could have an impact in preventing COVID. And the other drugs, there were 4 or 5 drugs they talked about. The other ones were drugs like Mesna and some other drugs that you might not be familiar with, but they were really focused on WR1065, cysteamine, Mesna. These were cancer, a lot of them for cancer, and a lot of them are intravenous-based drugs. And we are one of the actually additionally 4 or 5 drugs that were in the mix as really with efficacious potential. So strong safety, as in the history of this drug, as I mentioned, shows a lot of work done back in even the mid-2000s on preventing oxidative and reperfusion injury in heart and liver tissues. And, adding all that up, we saw the science is there. And, we were, as I mentioned, fast-tracked into this phase 3 and double-blinded, up to 1,000 people study, randomized, and its endpoints are about reducing hospitalization and death. So, we believe that, although COVID's gone on for a while, there's still, great opportunity for an antioxidant, a pill like ourselves that could work with an antiviral or on its own. Next slide. A little bit on the psychedelic side to get back to. So Derek, my associate, he was running a company called Psilocybin Pharma, and we acquired it, Psilocybin, back in the sort of 2020 timeframe. Psilocybin and Derek have strong history working with developing a lot of products around the cannabis sector and working in the psychedelics area. And it sort of laid the foundation for what Revive's doing in psychedelics. Built a lot of IP around formulation development. And if you look at some of the patents, you could go through some of the work we've done in building these, or our plan to build these formulations and bringing in a number of partners to look at delivery systems and how they'll work effectively with these formulations with partners like the University of Wisconsin. We're also doing a lot of work in psychedelics with the University of North Carolina on biosynthesis, looking at E. coli to build a number of different products. In terms of the finished product of psilocybin, psilocybin is quite expensive. So we're working with the team there, and we've got a lot of sort of IP from PharmaTher around psilocybin, which is focused really on traumatic brain injury and stroke, and just building out building a portfolio around these psychedelics. We also, it's not listed here, but we recently announced work we're doing with Ganoram mushroom with the University of Louisiana around helping look at these natural products to help look at breast cancer. A lot of preclinical work and lots of initiatives. Even this morning, we announced a transaction with Haven Life Sciences where we're sourcing a natural psilocybin from them, and we're going to be using that in a lot of our clinical work. And also, we have a lot of initiatives going on in Antigua on the clinical side and clinic side to further enhance our initiatives in the space. So we've got a pretty robust portfolio, and Derek can get into that a little more, but just a little background. Those are some of our partners, as I mentioned: PharmaThera, LTS, University of Wisconsin, North Carolina State University on the psilocybin biosynthesis side. Next slide. Yeah, so when I came into the company, I looked at the portfolio, and as I mentioned, I repurposed bucillamine for COVID. Then I subsequently brought in a team to help build the protocol and take it down the path. But even on the psychedelic side, our background was more on cannabinoids, and I saw the opportunity to transcend the delivery systems from what we're doing in that sector into psychedelics. So the delivery systems are a unique feature. They combine tannin and chitosan, which have unique features in terms of antifungal, antibacterial, antioxidant. And when you combine that with products on the cannabis side and the psilocybin side, we think that it is a differentiator in terms of the way it delivers the experience with potentially faster onset and a number of other characteristics. So always working with leading universities in the US to predominantly to support our work and to validate it. Next slide. Yeah, so quickly, just running through some of our partners. PharmaLum has a lot of work that we're doing with us on the bucillamine study. In the US, Delta, which is now our partner, and the University ISU and MLP Care in Turkey, which we're going to be working with us extensively on the tail end of the study. LTS is building formulations for us in Germany. PharmaThera is a partner. PharmaThera is also a public company, but focused more on ketamine, and we acquired a lot of their psilocybin assets on TBI stroke. University of South Carolina, that's where a lot of our IP came from, which we've licensed for autoimmune hepatitis with CBD, and working with psilocybin biosynthesis collaboration to create psilocybin from E. coli with North Carolina State University. Wisconsin is a big partner of ours on the psychedelics, psilocybin trials upcoming, and also, as I mentioned, on the delivery side. Next slide. Just quickly going through some of the comparisons. This sort of changes daily, but a lot of this is based on Canadian dollars. Some of our peers. So Revive is traded between a sort of an 89, 85 to around a 200 million market cap in COVID, when we sort of during the sort of earlier part of the year and in 2020. But as I mentioned, it's not a one-trick pony. It's a combination of a COVID story and psychedelics with some other IP. So it's quite unique. Next slide. Those are some of our peers on the psychedelic side.
And Michael, I think it's important to note that on the psychedelic side, you are as far along as a lot of these other companies, which are in phase 2 studies.
Yeah. I mean, I guess apart from bucillamine and the COVID stuff, if you look at some of the leaders you might have heard of, like MindMed, and is doing a lot of work with LSD, Ibogaine. A lot of their studies are outside of North America. Their valuations, were much higher. Went up to about $1 billion at one time. Obviously, leaders like Atai, Compass, Peter's I forget his last name, but obviously he's a big VC back PayPal. He's a
Talking about Peter Thiel.
Yeah, Peter Thiel. Sorry, excuse me. So he's a big investor in some of these plays, and they've all come off excessively. And I think our portfolio is comparable to some of the others. I mean, this is just a handful. I know Cybin works a lot on formulation development, so there's not many companies right now that have a portfolio in psychedelics and that are also in a phase 3 trial on its own for COVID. So it's really a unique story in terms of some of the parts. And hopefully our valuations eventually get better recognized as we move down the paths with these programs and initiatives. Next slide. Right. So This is a quick look at the team. There's myself, Derek, Carmela, our CFO. We've got Dr. McKee, which got a long service working on the clinical side with the military and some of the other players involved. Dr. Fahy, who's been a consultant doing a lot of work on field donors, and the board is consisted of myself and a number of science and business people. Yeah, so it's a bit of the stock information in terms of where we stand right now in terms of valuations. A lot of it's Canadian dollars. So I mean, this company went from a low of about 2 cents Canadian to around 90. It's trading right now for around high 20s, 27 or so. And obviously the market's been a bit erratic too, so it's affecting us in some ways, but we're hands down, and we're hoping to move forward on meeting our endpoints and continuing on. Next slide. Yeah, just a little more rationale on the study right now for bucillamine. I went through some of the main areas, but that's a lot of the science. You can take a look at it. It's a double field donor, glutathione enhancer, cytokine suppressor, and it's focused really on the antioxidant, anti-rheumatic side.
So I think we can,
references.
yep, we can leave it there. I'm going to open it up for Q&A. Obviously, we already have one question in queue, but if you have a question, type it into the Q&A or chat box, and we'll make sure that it gets answered. First question that came in is about the phase 3 trial. Can you expand upon how many U.S. enrollees are in the trial, and when do you expect to finish it by the end of 2022?
Yeah, I mean, we have dosed about 715 patients in the U.S. There are interim points at 210 is when that was the first interim point where we selected a higher dose to continue on. So what I did basically is, and the team was looking at some of the data from Merck and some of the other players. A lot of these trials were being done in Eastern Europe to get a sort of profile of patients that have higher comorbidities. And in some of these Eastern European countries, a lot of the trials are done in the hospitals. So we moved the rest of the trial to Turkey. The goal is to basically to hope to finish, the end of Q1 and, or early April around there, but Q1's our target, at least to get to the 800 level where we could potentially look at, where the regulatory DSMB or some of the other bodies may look at the data and open it for EUA or something like that. But our target is towards the end of Q1, but, there are logistics planning, a lot of details that go into this. So that's our sort of our plan into the next several months.
Yeah, I know that the move to Turkey for the trial was better in terms of the subject pool you had to work with. Was that more expensive to do that versus US? Did it end up saving the company money, or did you just want to do it so you could get it done?
Well,
quickly?
we don't we're embarking on that. It's underway right now, and a lot of logistics planning, looking regulatory approval there. This is Turkey, but it's part of the U.S. study. I just want to be clear.
Yep.
It's not a separate study. Obviously, there could be tremendous opportunity to do stuff in Turkey on its own down the road, which would be new studies. But this is part of the U.S. study, just an international component. Obviously, it's cheaper to do it in the in Eastern Europe, but that wasn't the driving factor. Driving factor was more on the fact that the other majors that are left did a lot of their trial internationally because of the profile of patients, comorbidities. They go to the hospital to do these trials, and there's just a different makeup there. Obviously, earlier on in the trial in the U.S., there's more competition in recruiting patients in some of the majors. But
this is a shrewd move, I think, Michael. We followed along closely with a number of these companies in procurement, patients but it's hard. I mean, one company we work with, did amazingly well finding folks in the Philippines, and yet that was a terra incognita, never really done clinical trials there before, didn't have the infrastructure. So every virtue of it turned into, a liability. And
Yeah. I mean, it's not that easy to put together. So, I mean, I know a lot of shareholders get, upset on terms of, timelines and so forth. I mean, we're obviously moving as fast as we can. We're not big pharma. We don't have those budgets, but, we did pretty well in terms of, moving down the path from where this came from. I mean, starting, in a phase 3 to get it funded. Initially I funded with some people, the company myself, when it had a 1 million Canadian market cap. Then we raised money at, 2.5, 3 million cap, took it up to, almost 200 million. And then it pulled back a bit. We raised about 25 mil back in February of this year. And, there's a lot of logistics in the US. We had up to 50 sites, and I think we did about 45 in the US. But, we made that move to Turkey. It caused a bit of a delay, but I think the benefits of the data that'll be procured for them will show the benefit, because, the science is all here in terms of the preclinical work from
right.
Dr. Fahy, having a phase 2 for gout, like it's all there. And that's how we got to this phase 3 level. We skipped phase 1, phase 2.
The trial has a lot more reasons to succeed than it does to fail. Really, it does.
Right. The trials are different science. I mean, trials are based on statistical models, hospitalization, death, and stuff. But predominantly, what we found was, Merck did. Pfizer, I didn't dig in as much, but both of them had exposure in these countries. They were not only done in the US. And like Merck's study, a lot of it was done in Europe on other areas. And that's because also the profile of the patients, comorbidity level, patients that are sicker in these countries go to the hospital, not to clinics, and they're getting treated in the hospital, and they can do the trial in the hospital. So it becomes easy. And we have a very good infrastructure in Turkey with Dr. Archie, which is one of our associates, and he's very tied in there with the government and university. So we have a lot of support for the study from the right people, the regulatory body agencies. So we're just looking to optimize and give us our best footing in terms of potentially, getting EUA at 800 level, and even if we can't, just continuing on with the other 200 up to 1,000 to give us our best shot. And we'll do our best to move it as quickly as we can.
The other thing I like about Revive, Michael, is that the manifest intelligence, I think, that's gone into how you've done things. And I'm really not trying to blow smoke, but I think that at the advent of the COVID-19 storm, what was amazing to me was, for the medical community, how much pre-existing medical knowledge was as if it went flying out the windows, as if we had never known it. We had to reinvent the wheel,
right,
and everything. I got very excited about the use of interferons, plural, for this, which I think may have some very interesting data yet to sound there with other companies. But again, just the idea of reducing therapy as a means of combating pathologic oxidation.
right.
Who came along except you all to think about that? And it's just because it's old science doesn't mean it's not splendid science, right?
Right.
And,
I mean, as I said, like, I'm not a doctor, but I did. We looked at the data.
yeah.
I saw the potential of bucillamine, and I have a pretty good understanding of the science there, and I thought it could have a significant impact on oxidative stress. And it had a good history of being a cytokine suppressor in terms of what it's done with rheumatoid arthritis and its other preclinical work. And back in 2020, as I mentioned, there was a lot of talk, on monoclonal antibodies. That was sort of the delivery drug of choice at that time from companies like Gilead or Regeneron. And Eli Lilly had some intravenous drugs as well on the arthritis side. And there was an opportunity, obviously, to have a pill. Now, as I mentioned, our drug can work with some of the antivirals or on its own, but Merck's drugs, some of them have had obviously safety issues that have been coming up in terms of mutagenic defects, but we'll see how that evolves. I mean, and obviously Pfizer's drug had much better efficacy, but you got to take 2 pills, which is the Ritenovar and the their actual other drug as well. So we'll see how that. But there's opportunity for us, the versatile and anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and COVID is could evolve more and more mutations. I mean, I don't think it's over. I mean, there's lots of opportunity for this type of a drug to serve its purpose down the road for other pandemics or other chronic inflammatory diseases, right? So
just a rational approach. The problem with the thing about common sense is often said, it isn't that common anymore, is it?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
I want to get to
Sure.
the psychedelics, but there was one other quick question.
Right.
So how much do you estimate will be the cost to complete the clinical trials? And does Revive need to show for approval what type of COVID patient is best for treatment? Example, early stage, advanced stage, et cetera.
Well, on that question, I mean, this study is designed for mild to moderate patients, and ones that are going to progress to more severe. So the goal of the study's endpoints is to prevent them from getting more severe, getting hospitalized, or dying, preventing them getting ventilated. But it's focused more on the mild to moderate. That's how the protocol's designed. And we did add some other secondary endpoints, which I think will hold a lot of weight with the regulatory bodies, like viral load and some anti-inflammatory markers.
Yep.
Yeah, and just the other question on like running studies like this we're looking at in the U.S. could be somewhere around 25 to 30 million, and Turkey is slightly less expensive, but the cost of this type of study is around 25 to 30 million.
Okay, great. So I want to kind of switch gears to the psychedelics. Derrick, can you give the group your background and kind of how you came to Revive and how that whole kind of marriage happened?
So I developed a number of different products that are offered throughout the cannabis space, not only in the US, but offered in Canada as well. I'm a product design guy. So I started off with, how do you develop a product? You put the R&D and the research into it. Then you place the systems behind the product for development. Then you get the QA approval. Then you get the quality approval. You go through the entire process of how do you develop a product that can be manufactured, say, in Wisconsin, and then be manufactured in California and be manufactured throughout the US or in markets of general opportunity. So I started off with that in the cannabis space when it came to fruition. And I saw the path that cannabis really took. Cannabis took between 5 and 6 years to really come to market and really be a product that was available to the public. And I see the psychedelic space taking the very same trajectory, but with a difference of endpoint. So right now, psychedelics is starting off as largely a microdosing crowd where you have people taking small therapeutic doses of different psychedelic compounds and receiving different effects in the mental health space. You have Compass, who worked very closely with Hopkins to get the breakthrough status for psilocybin and MDMA in medication-resistant depression in cancer patients. So here was kind of the first real checkbox that said, hey, we've got opportunity with all of these compounds that at one time were considered to have no therapeutic value whatsoever. And so here we are a couple of years later, and we've got companies in the space that are doing different things. But where I think really Revive stands out is that we have products that are not only catered to the therapeutic world in regards to a prescription type basis, but we also have products that could later be tailored towards the recreational market, with keeping safety and efficacy really kind of at the forefront of when you start putting products to market.
great. And can you talk a little bit about like how you're working to figure out the dosing for psilocybin? Like how are you figuring it out in terms of you know
We're
the build of the patient, everything that you have to take into consideration?
So we take into a number of mitigating factors when it comes to the patients and dosage and things like that. So we know right now in a mouse model, for example, which translates roughly to a human model, we look at a 250 milligrams per kilogram of body weight is what the LD50 is for psilocybin. We're never even coming close to that. When you consider that it takes 3.5 to 4 grams of magic mushrooms itself to equate out to approximately, say, 10 to 15 milligrams of psilocybin as an active ingredient. So we really have a wide range of dosage to play with when it comes to how do we address mental health? How do we address PTSD? How do we address the symptom picture that most of us in the space are kind of targeting right now? And so we're starting this off incrementally. When we look at studies, we're looking at studies from a microdosing perspective. And then later on, we're going to consider macrodosing, something north of the 35 milligram dosage spot. So it's kind of, for a lot of the companies out there right now, it's very much, it's how do they say it? It's clinical research. It is patient influenced research of this patient did well with this. We're going to move on to this dosage with this patient and see how they do with that.
So how would you see like the course of treatment for, let's say, like anxiety?
So here's what we can look at. We can look at ketamine right away. So ketamine right away is a compound that has an IND that has the ability to be prescribed to a patient in a clinical setting, usually in a hospital type setting. Ketamine has never been a take-home treatment yet. But when we look at how ketamine interacts for mental health, the cost of an average ketamine treatment is between $1,200 and I've seen as high as $1,700 per treatment. And you're there for about 6 hours and you're going for a treatment once every 2 weeks or once a month, depending on the prescribing physician's course of treatment. When we look at psilocybin, I think it's going to be a treatment very similar or not too different from current anti-anxiety and antidepressant style medications.
Oh, great. That's great. So you just mentioned, Michael, earlier that you just announced an agreement to buy psilocybin from a supplier. Can you talk about what you think would be, excuse me, how expensive is it? Like what kind of margins do you think you can get on these kinds of treatments?
So when we look at the margins on treatments right now, this is in the initial research phase, which means it's very costly to do the research. And we found ways of decreasing the cost to our shareholders by finding other avenues to pursue. So we're looking at both the synthetic as well as the naturally derived psilocybin compound. So when you're taking a synthetic psilocybin analog, which is pretty much what's being used clinically throughout, these can cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per gram. Now, looking at the cost for naturally derived, we're saving quite a bit going with the naturally derived psilocybin. So it's trying to figure out how can we best integrate naturally derived medicine with a protocol that fits the toolbox that a physician will need in the future.
Got it. It's great.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, we're still sourcing, synthetic psilocybin also from different groups like University of Wisconsin. We do a lot of work with, they have a relationship with USONA. So the major guys are USONA and Compass Pathways. So, through Wisconsin, psilocybin is being used, from a partner like USONA and some of the studies that they're doing there that we're helping to sponsor and we're involved with, like for meth and TBI stroke. But, we are looking at, on the delivery side, other opportunities as well with, natural psilocybin with partners like Haven, which we announced today. And those are, we're going to be prominently using that type of a platform in some of the work we're doing in Antigua, where we have, a lot of potential to do clinical work there and opening up clinics and areas like that. So we're looking at both. And as well, we're doing work with the University of North Carolina on more effective, cheaper ways to use psilocybin. Obviously, taking inputs like yeast. People use yeast, you might have heard of, but in this case, we're working with organisms like E. coli to fabricate psilocybin.
Yep. We do have a question from one of our viewers. I'm going to allow him to ask it directly. Go ahead, Maurice, if you want to ask.
Unmute yourself.
Well, maybe he's that's okay. Maybe you might want to type that in, and we'll make sure that it gets answered. Sorry about that. So I think, Mark, do you have anything you want to add here, or anything that we can?
No, I commend them, for being a viable contender in that space. This when the psychedelic thing got going, I think many of us at Biopub sort of thought, a bandwagon, where's this going to lead? In fact, it's really led to some very interesting places with several of the companies that we've had in our stable follow-up, who are doing studies. I used to think of I think Derrick and we've talked about this before, but the hallucinatory experience, I've never had one, but that is a manifestation of extreme toxic insult to the neurons. And in fact, nothing really could be farther from the truth. No, they're not advocating pushing patients to the hallucinatory state, but these are not dangerous drugs that, quote, fry your synapses and leave you, forever somebody other than you entered, as being. And the antidepressants that we have out there, as somebody who caused a lot of depression treating hepatitis C with interferon back in the era where we did that, I can tell you the agents we have done nothing but create a class of the walking wounded who they may not fall through the floor every day, but they don't get well either. And the capability of the newer psychedelics to really jazz things up, kind of jumpstart things as never before, cause synaptic outgrowth and sprouting, it really revives a lot of optimism I have that we can, no longer have the walking wounded, chronic depressed people, but people who actually recover from it and snap back fully and really, go on to enjoy vibrant lives again. I mean, if you're in practice today, you've got this tranche of patients in that practice who are forever on Paxil, Prozac, Effexor, and never come off it, they never get well.
Well, and I think, Mark, when we look at it, right now we have psychedelic therapy. One day it's going to remove psychedelic and it will just be therapy.
Right. Agreed.
And I think when we look at the market, when we look at the opportunity, we see the damage that some of the antidepressants do. I can't find any notable damage that magic mushrooms have done. I can't find it really, other than people going to jail for possessing these compounds and possessing these products. I can't find the impact on society where it has been deliberately negative. And when we look at the cannabis industry and we look at, these are things that were made up by governments that don't support the views of the people today, and not to get into all that rhetoric and whatnot. But when we look at psilocybin today, we look at an opportunity to take another compound and see what kind of therapeutic effect and therapeutic value it really has. And this really brings me to the next kind of thing is, I'm not sure if this question comes in and is directed at reimbursement for psychedelics, but it's going to take some time to get a DIN number for these drugs. And all of us are competing really in the same pool to get to that magical DIN number after doing the research and be giving a drug identification number that can be written onto a prescription pad and then filled at a pharmacy. And that's really the end goal for all of us, is to get there. But I also believe too that there's an opportunity to really open a lot of eyes along the way to that number.
Yeah, and to that question also, is probably directed to at bucillamine. Michael, have there been discussions about reimbursement from insurance for treatment?
We really haven't, have to make a little adjustment to my computer here, I'm sorry. I mean, we're not at that level yet. Obviously, there's, we'd have to get approved, and there's a number of different regulatory issues we'd have to address. I mean, we are looking at different partners right now in terms of potentially for manufacturing, and we have a supplier in Asia, but on the reimbursement side, we haven't crossed that.
Great. And Derek, to your point earlier, talking about the safety profile for psilocybin, also there's no addictive properties to it as well, which makes it beneficial.
No, that's the big benefit of this, is that even when we look at it in a macro dosing fashion, the benefits of macro dosing as well as microdosing, there's a significant benefit to both. And, it depends on what type of therapy you're looking for and what type of therapy your physician will recommend in the future. It's really a unique adjunct to mental health.
Yeah, it's not like coming off of other pills that you would take for, mental health or anything like that.
Having had family and friends that have been on antidepressants and those types of medications, it's scary when they come off of them and the effects that they go through, the zapping syndrome that you get that can last for years or months, even post last dose. It's quite troubling what people go through today, but if you don't have psilocybin tomorrow, not a bad day. Doesn't hurt.
Derek, when I was growing up, it was when I was early medical school, I don't think there are any relatives alive who would be adversely affected by the story, but had a grandfather who was unipolar depressive, which is a interesting thing. And generally speaking, about every 9 to 10 months, he would become, slower, more and more torpid, begin hallucinating at night, convinced that Satan was looking in his window. He was a minister, ironically, and this was pre-advent of even the SSRIs. And there's really nothing to do for the man but topical Duke Power, and 10 sessions of that, and he was usually right again. But that was quite an ordeal for him to go through. A lot of amnesia and a lot of fright, fear associated with it, and that wouldn't even be, I'm not saying, I'm not making any negative swipe against ECT. It's still a wonderful therapy, but I don't think that would even enter into, treatment consideration now at his age. There's so many other ways, and yet we can even do way better, now than we're doing. And kind of where I was going with this question, a cultural sort of question would be, let's say, 10, 20 years on, when some good historiographer, cultural commentator is writing on this, I'm wondering what answer they'll give to the question of, not why we tipped back toward the psychedelics, but why now? Did COVID have something to do with it? Was it that our neuroscience prowess had finally gotten to the point where it really was begging the question to come around again after so many decades? Or, was there a secret cult venerating Timothy Leary? What's going on? Why did this all coalesce into one thing? I mean, I know it's been likened as a follow-on to the pot set piece. I don't think that's it, though. Do you?
No, I think it was the pandemic that really brought this out. I think when people spent enough time with their basement and Zoom calls like this, I think it brought people to a point where they stopped wanting to stare at 20 different pill bottles in their medicine cabinet. I have this for pain, I have this for that, and I think some people came to the reality that I don't have a headache because of my Advil deficiency. And I think some people came to that reality, whether it was through hardship or whether it was through facing their own inner demons. And I think it gave way to a lot of people going back online going, hey, if I'm going to be at home, I might as well enjoy it. I used to do these when I was younger. And, I think people saw a benefit from it. I think they saw some unique benefit that improved their life, where they read about these stories from Silicon Valley of people microdosing and having great success with their ADHD, having great success with their mental health, their ability to multitask and accomplish a montage of tasks at one particular time. I think people find it as an enhancement to their life, not necessarily a dependency.
I agree.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
the,
interesting that we still think of the SSRIs as being the thing that changed everything. And really, what did they change? I can't think of a competent neuroscientist who really agrees that serotonin uptake inhibition has anything to do with what they accomplish. I'm not going to deny they don't accomplish something. I think that if you're having daily crying jags and ideating about suicide, it shuts down a lot of that stuff. It does, but we don't know how. And secondly, they don't make you well. They don't bring you back to being that person you had been, 10 years earlier before all this shit, of life began sticking to you. And from where I intuit the psychedelic set piece is taking us is that, we may really, restore personal operating systems to a prior mode of goodness, bring people back around to being who they were once, again.
Well, and that comes back to the way the nervous system and the way the body works. When we look at something like, and I'll use this as a generalization, when we look at something like phantom limb pain, so patients that are born without limbs, they still feel pain and nerve sensation because the nervous system is hardwired. The nervous system doesn't know you don't have a hand.
Right.
And once we start messing with that chemistry, once we start messing with all these things, and what's the single best thing for somebody who suffers from that is biofeedback. Biofeedback, a basic mirror in a box, helps to prevent it. And when we think about the basics of the human brain and what we can contribute to it, we've always tried to synthetically come up with a way to monetize the brain chemicals, the synapses, the axons, the dendrites, all these little tiny components of the brain with SSRIs. But what we really needed was to look at something that was already here thousands of years before we even knew about it. Oh. And what did it take? But, you can look back in ancient history. You can see pictures of mushrooms drawn in pyramids. They didn't have pictures of pills of SSRIs.
I mean, when I was practicing, I saw a frightening number of, practitioners. They weren't necessarily, psychiatrists who would just, take those horrible atypical antipsychotics and just titrate them up till all humanity was void, till the patient stopped complaining about anything, till basically the face was just a blank. Anything going on? How are you feeling today? Just, the goal was titration to a null state, and they called that, therapeutic acceptability. Patient voices no complaints.
Well, and we used to institutionalize mental health. We used to lock them up.
Right.
Yep. How wrong were we there? We would take people who could otherwise be productive in society for a basic disability and stuff them in the nut house. And that's what we called mental health therapy back then. Well, today, thankfully, we have calmer minds and we have more brilliant minds that are after it. And we have people like Revive with experience who can take things from where they are today and move them down the clinical path. That's the important thing, is that's how we'll benefit society, and that's how things will get moving.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great spot to wrap it up. I appreciate Derek and Michael and Dr. Swain for coming on today and having this discussion and introducing us to Revive Therapeutics.
Yeah.
Companies obviously not only making great strides with bucillamine, for treatment of COVID, but in the psychedelic space as well. I think a very important slide too is if you look at in the presentation was when you looked at the market cap of Revive versus some of the other companies in the psychedelic space. And Michael made a good point earlier. Those companies don't even have anything in the pipeline for COVID. So we feel it's a very undervalued situation. And we think it's definitely worth taking a look, especially down here as it sold off a little bit with the market. So thank you guys for coming on today and giving us the update on the company.
Appreciate it. Thanks once again. Thank you.
Yeah, and you can get additional information on Revive Therapeutics at the company's website at Revive Thera, including details on the company's current pipeline, as well as latest press releases. Any questions that weren't answered today, feel free to reach out to me. If I can't answer them, I will make sure I get them to Michael and Derek and have them answer it. I'm going to send out a feedback link after this. There is no code word for the feedback, so don't worry about that. So I look forward to your timely feedback. It's a very important tool, not only for Torrey Hills, but especially for our clients as well. So until then, everybody, till the next time, be safe, be well, and we will talk to you all soon.
Once
Have a
again,
great
thanks
day,
again.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.